Before I get to this week's guest, I have an important announcement. With nearly 30 episodes complete and over 25,000 downloads of Deviatus to date, I'm pleased to announce the launch of the new Deviatus email newsletter. My first issue will be sent out during the first Monday in June, which is June 5th, and I will regularly be publishing new content each month during the first week of every month. The format will allow me to present the most current information in paranormal topics that don't necessarily fit within the structure of the podcast. This will include a collection of some of the latest stories and information and strange news that I, myself, am putting together. With these curated topics, I hope to give recipients of the newsletter additional strange information to digest, along with the same spirit of the show. In addition, each newsletter will also include some form of evidence collected during a paranormal investigation for your review. The evidence will not necessarily always be my own, and could come in various forms like photographs, audio, and video recordings. It's my hope to open up discussion about the evidence presented and to challenge anyone who weighs in to leave any preconceived notions or biases at the door. Finally, I'll have a summary section of each episode of Deviatus that was released in the previous month as a convenient shortcut should you ever find the desire to reference it, share it with your friends, or if you just want to listen again. I hope this will become a welcome addition to your inbox, and I encourage you to subscribe. As I stated, the first issue will go out on June 5th and every first Monday of the month following, so please feel free to subscribe on my homepage at deviatus.com, and thank you once again for listening to the show. When the spiritualist movement began in the late 1800s, psychic mediums commonly held seances in attempts to communicate with the dead. This practice became popular in the United States after the end of the Civil War, when families would long to hear just one more time from their deceased loved ones. The introduction of talking boards gave the everyday person an opportunity to attempt spirit communication without the need for a spiritual guide or medium. The first talking boards were nothing more than flat wooden boards with numbers and letters painted on it, and it wasn't until 1890 when Elija Bond decided to patent the board as a parlor game, giving it the name Ouija. Some say the word Ouija was derived from the ancient Egyptian word meaning good luck, or a combination of French and German words meaning yes. But other accounts claim that the creator of the board simply placed his fingers on the planchette and posed the question, "What shall I call you?" The planchette reportedly moved to spell out the letters O-U-I-J-A. One of the things I enjoy most about producing this podcast is getting to hear personal stories from listeners of the show. This week's guest is one of those listeners. Samantha Lang responded to one of my questions on the Deviatus Facebook page, then emailed me her terrifying story about what happened to her as a child following the use of a Ouija board. After I learned her story, I just had to have her on the show to talk about it. And while this was the story that initially caught my attention, she shares some of the many unexplained experiences she's had throughout her life since then. It makes one wonder if a single experience can open up something inside us to have additional experiences. I'll be posting her full written account on my website at deviatus.com, but I'm happy to be able to share her firsthand account here. So you originally replied to my question on Facebook where it says, what's your opinion on the use of Ouija boards for paranormal investigation?
Yes, that's true. I did, because I had a not so good encounter with one. Like I'd stated, my parents went to like a dinner party kind of thing. And from memory, it was with relatives of my father's. And we were small. I was probably about 8 at the time. At the very most, I was 9 years old. They took us to this party, and we were pretty good kids, me and my sister. We'd just, play with our toys, read our books, and basically go to sleep, And but I do remember that at one stage for after dinner entertainment, they played this game that I was fascinated by. I'd never seen anything like it. And this is back in the, mid to late 70s, so a long time ago. And they were laughing, and they had, a glass on the table and people were asking questions. And I can't remember because this was a long time ago now, but I do remember that they asked if there was anything that the spirit needed to tell them. And the reply was, pump up your tires. That's what it spelled out. And I thought, oh, well, that's really funny, isn't it? That everybody started laughing, and that was it, basically. End of the night, we ended up going home. And but then my parents decided to do their own Ouija board sessions, and they used an old-fashioned breakfast tray that had the legs that would sit over your lap when you had breakfast in bed.
Was this like the next day, or was it the same night?
No, it wasn't the same night, but it probably would have been within a week or so of when it happened. It was quite fresh in my mind and recent. And so they cut letters and, wrote on paper, cut them out, put the little squares around the edge, stuck down, and they just use an upturned glass as the planchette. Yeah. And I suppose they were playing with it. We didn't see that because I don't know where they did that, but they left the table out, the tray table out, in the lounge room. And my sister and I saw it, and we thought, oh, wouldn't that be fun to have a go doing that? So we copied what we'd seen, and we sat down either side of the little table, and we asked, is there anybody there? And we had our index fingertips on each side of the glass. And it would move. It moved around. And my sister wasn't pushing it, and I wasn't pushing it. And I know that I had some sessions on it where I did it by myself. And I know I was not moving that glass around. I mean, I've heard theories about, unconscious muscle movement and all that sort of stuff.
Like maybe the ideomotor response kind of thing.
Yes, maybe. I don't know. I can't say for sure, but it did seem to, the glass seemed to glide. We used the old-fashioned tumblers, and it seemed to glide, very smoothly and easily, not like it was being pushed by me. But, so we did that for a while. I can't remember how long, but there was quite a few sessions that we did on it. And at first it was fun. Isn't this a familiar story? At first it was fun, and it was just, some silly responses, and we'd ask, how old are you or when did you die? I can't remember those specifics because they didn't frighten me. Right. But I remember the last time we played with it was when it was a little weird. The responses were just a bit different. And this thing, whatever it was, claimed it was from Mars, the planet Mars. And I suppose I was just young enough then, and my sister to say, oh, how cool, Mars, all right. And then we'd start asking questions like, how long ago did you die? And it would say like thousands of years ago. It was obviously just having, fun with us or whatever, or so it seemed. And then that seemed to be, it. We thought, oh, well, this is getting silly now. There was no anonymous messages or anything that I could tell you that it gave us, because I'm pretty sure it didn't. But we had this little ceremony, which we used to think in our childish, logic, that the spirit was actually, the entity was actually inside the glass, the upturned glass. So we used to actually pick it up and waft it around and say goodbye, which I suppose is a kind of childish closing ritual for the board. I'm not sure. But then it was only a little while later, and again we're probably talking days to a week, that some pretty strange stuff started to happen where we lived. And we lived in a very urban centre in Sydney, a very big place. And we lived in a block of flats or units. apartments. I don't know what you call them over there, but high rise, many stories,
apartments. Yeah,
and self-contained. And sorry. So we were surrounded by people. It wasn't like an isolated place or anything. But the first really strange thing that I remember happening was that I woke up in the middle of the night. And I wasn't a child to wake up in the middle of the night very often. So I kind of sat up and I thought, because I'd heard a noise. And I figured, that's what's woken me up. But it was a strange noise. It was like every single piece of crockery that was in our kitchen cupboards was being shuffled around. Like all the plates, saucers, cups were being thrown around. I'm trying to think if you can imagine what that clinky sound, and it just sounded like everything was being thrown around in the cupboards, and it was really loud, really loud. And I thought, I don't know what that is. And from where my sister and my bedroom was, I could actually see straight down the hall where the kitchen was. It had a sliding door. And I saw that the sliding door was closed, even though I'm sure I'd heard it open and close, like that sliding noise while all this was going on. And the light was off because you could see the light, around the door at the bottom and that. And there was no light on. And I thought, that's really weird. But nobody seemed to hear it except me. And then I went back to sleep. And the next morning I said, Mum, Dad, did you get up and go to the kitchen last night? And they said, no. And I thought, okay, maybe, I don't know. I dreamed it or something, even though I know I didn't. But, you rationalize things how you do. And then, the atmosphere in the place we live started to get kind of heavy is the only way I could put it. It just became scary there. I hadn't said anything to my sister that I'd had these few little things that, I felt scared now all of a sudden when I never did before. I actually did tell my mother that I felt that there was something wrong, that the place was haunted. And, like I said, when I was a young child, there wasn't any internet back then, and ghosts were actually Scooby-Doo and Casper and things like that. And I hadn't associated all the other kinds of stuff with it, and that was what I thought. And my mother reassured me and said, no, look, don't be silly. This is a new block of flats. How could there be anything here? Don't worry. And so I kind of thought, okay, yep, fine. And then I had the incident with the poking under our bed. My sister and I slept in bunk beds, and I've been the oldest. I used to usually sleep down the bottom because she used to like to be up the top, though we would swap, when I thought it was about time that I had to go being on the top bunk. But I was on the bottom bunk. And these were the old-fashioned bunks. They were wooden framed, but they had a steel, like mesh bottom where the mattress sat on the top.
Right.
And we had foam mattresses. We didn't have big inner spring ones. They were just foam mattresses on this mesh, steel mesh base, like a net. And I was asleep in the bunk when I was going to sleep anyway, when I felt something push up from underneath, and it scared me. And I thought, what's that? And then it kept doing it, and it kept doing it. And this happened for a while. This wasn't just one night of that. It used to happen just about every single night. It was just like somebody was underneath pushing, up like that. And because it was a spring, like a steel mesh base, it could go up, And it used to get more and more violent, is the more you ignored it, it seemed the more violent it would get with this pushing. And then it would get to the stage where it was totally uncomfortable and it would force you out of bed. You know, I reckon if it had gone on, it would have knocked you out of bed. I was tucked in though, so. Oh. And I decided that I would bounce back. So I would kind of I'd be on my side and I'd push my hip into the bed, you know, kind of like when it did it, I'd push back down, but it would just push back up again. Now, while this was happening, nobody heard anything. I would be saying to my sister, wake up, you know, it's happening. And she would be dead to the world. I could not wake her up. Now, my sister was a heavy sleeper, I will say, but not to the point where I don't think I could have woken her up. Do you know what I'm saying?
Right.
My parents never heard me yell or anything like that. So I don't know what that isolation thing was, but it seemed that whatever this was could isolate a certain person or a certain area of space.
Well, I gotta ask you, how loud did you try to yell for your parents?
Well, the incident where I know I screamed and I yelled for quite some time, was the night that I was relaxing and I'd been tucked in. I was on the bottom bunk again, the infamous bottom bunk, and I'd slipped my foot into the little pocket between the mattress and where the blanket tucked in. Then it made a little pocket. And I used to, emphasis on used to, sleep with my foot in that pocket. It was just a thing a habit I had. Well, this night I felt something grab my foot through the blankets. And it wasn't a soft grab. It wasn't a touch. It was an actual, I've got you kind of grip. And it did not ease up. I actually pulled my foot away from it. Like I could feel it, the pressure kind of leaving my foot, you know, like if you hang onto something really solidly and it pulls out, that's what it was like. And it scared me so much because that's the first time that I suppose it had done anything physical like that. Even though there'd been the pushing of the bed, that felt like a hand and it scared me so bad. And I screamed for my mother. I wasn't just, oh, Mum. I yelled and yelled. I had my head under the blanket because I was so scared. And I yelled and yelled and yelled until I actually, I suppose in my emotional state, I fell asleep. I know that sounds silly, but I exhausted myself yelling for her. And in the morning, I said to her, you know, Mum, I had something scary happen last night and I called out for you so loud and she just said, I never heard you. Wow. I never heard you. And I've asked her, my mum and dad are still alive, and I've asked them, you know, what was that about? You know, I was yelling, you know, all those things that happened. And she said, yeah, I figured that there was something going on, but no, I never heard you when you yelled. So
that's just the stuff of nightmares right there.
Yeah, it was. That was really, really scary. And I kind of thought I was on my own, you know. I didn't realise at that time that my sister had been experiencing stuff too because we hadn't talked about it. Maybe because I don't know, it was so scary that we just kept it to ourselves, I think. I don't know. But when I finally did say to my sister, you know, this has been happening when I've been trying to sleep and that something grabbed my foot and I'm really, really scared. I don't want to sleep in that bed anymore and all that sort of stuff. And my sister said, oh, I've had stuff happen to me too. But the stuff that was happening to her was more visual, if you want to put it that way. I had all these physical things happening. Hers was far more visual. She was actually seeing things.
Well, but before you tell us what she saw, I think it's important to ask maybe from a skeptic's perspective of you know, how someone who's skeptical might say, how are you sure that you weren't dreaming this?
Okay. Um, well, I suppose I could never, say to convince anybody 100%. I can only say that even as a child, I knew the difference between being awake and being asleep. I know I was definitely not asleep when it happened. I mean, if I had nightmares, they weren't like this.
So you're convinced 100%, and then also you later found out that your sister was having these similar
Yes.
experiences.
Yeah, which was really, I felt really bad for her,
Mm-hmm.
but it also made me feel better because I knew it wasn't just me.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, she had been seeing the wardrobe doors open on their own and close, and it would just do this over and over and over. And she would be trying to wake me up, and I would not wake up. So even that story was the same. She couldn't wake me up either. The worst thing that she saw, she told me, was that she was sitting on the bottom bunk one day, because we often used to sit to read our little golden books that we had.
Mm-hmm.
And she was sitting on the bottom bunk reading a book, and she said she just saw something, and she looked up and she saw this hazy outline of a hand and a forearm kind of come down from the bed, the top bunk, so nearly right over the top of her. And she said she was so scared she just sat there, not, knowing, stunned into inaction, I guess. And then she realized that to get past it, she would have to kind of maneuver around it because of where this hand was. And she said as she did that, she swears she saw it kind of make a clenching motion as she did that. Now, I mean, yeah, my sister said she was fully awake when that happened. She wasn't asleep. And she's a bit younger than me, but still only 13 months apart from me. So
Okay.
she was 7 or so when this happened. So, yeah.
Wow. That's just, I mean, the whole thing just gives me chills. And I think at one point during our email conversation, you had asked if I had heard of anything happening similar to that.
Yes.
And, at the time, there's a few things. I think we could go down a few roads here. Talking about the hand coming out from under the bed, I actually did there was a home investigation that it was my first one. It's been my only one, actually, that I've done thus far, where this family asked us to come in, and when we were investigating their bedroom, I was with another investigator, and she's sensitive, so I don't know if this is something that I could have seen or if it was just something that she could perceive. But at the same time that we heard it was like a dresser, the little metal handle on a dresser. I have it on audio where that metal handle kind of clinked, like as if somebody lifted up and let it drop. And but at the same time as that, she said, "Oh my God, a hand!" And I was unaware of this, but she later described to me that she saw a hand come out from under the bed. And
oh, great!
I couldn't tell. She wasn't sure if it was grabbing at someone. Both of us were within a couple feet from it, but she said it just kind of poked out for a second and then went back under.
Right.
That's the only similar thing I've kind of been near experience-wise. And then I think it was the day after you asked me that, I interviewed Ed Roman, and he had kind of a similar experience, where it was he was trying to vocalize something. Nobody could hear him, and he thought he was being really loud. And
yes,
up until that moment, I had never heard of anything like that before. I mean, I've heard of sleep paralysis where you try to scream, but you're not able to, make an audible noise. But that's not what happened here.
No, I was definitely. Well, I wasn't asleep, so I
Right.
know I wasn't paralyzed, and my vocal cords were definitely working. I remember, but that when, and it's only just now that I've actually thought about the common thing of my sister seeing the hand and the forearm and what felt like a hand grabbing my foot. So it was kind of the same thing. But like I said, hers was a visual thing and mine was a physical thing. So I don't know if there's, that common thing there, that it was both of us. It was like very much like a hand kind of thing that we felt or saw. I'm
sorry to interrupt.
That's okay.
Did you see the hand when it grabbed your foot?
No.
Or okay?
No, it was dark. It was lights out, bedtime kind of thing. So I only felt it. I never saw it. No. But it did scare me so much that I could not sleep without blankets, or at the very least a sheet over my head for about 25 years.
Wow. Wow. I don't blame you one bit.
I just didn't want to see anything. It frightened me so badly. I know that habit of mine started after that happened, and it's taken me till a long, long, long time to actually feel confident enough not to wrap the sheet right over my head. I would wrap the blankets or the sheet right over my head and just leave a little breathing hole so I could get some oxygen, and that was how I used to sleep.
At what point did you connect the possibility of the experimenting with the Ouija board to these events?
Funnily enough, I don't know if at the time I actually connected the two. I think it was only later when I started hearing that these things happen that I thought, oh, we'd done that, with this makeshift Ouija board, and then that happened. So it did make me think, did this thing that said it was from, it gave us a name and everything, that it was from Mars, that it did not leave, or did something else? It was probably later, because like I said, I hadn't at that stage had any exposure really to scary movies or the supernatural, the paranormal. It just wasn't in my life at that stage. So I guess it was hard for me too, because I didn't have the real words to actually describe what was happening. When I did say to my mum, I think the house is haunted, she probably thinks like, things wafting around in the middle of the night. I don't think she knew that that's what I was talking about, the activity. I still to this day don't know what to call what happened. There's the plates and that, from what I've read, that sounds very poltergeisty, throwing things around. I have to say too, when I checked in the morning, nothing had moved. So this was more of an auditory thing than going out there and finding evidence. There was none, which is what really confused me too as a child,
Yeah.
So.
Well, I want to go back to one critical point I think that is important, where in your email you were talking about, you found out it was from Mars and it was thousands of years old, but it told you its name.
Yes, it did, and I haven't said that name out loud since.
Okay.
So yeah,
well, and I don't want to make you uncomfortable by saying it now, but maybe with your permission, I can post your story that you emailed me on the site, which includes the name. Yeah,
you can do that.
Okay.
I don't know why. I feel I don't like to say the name.
Well, it's interesting that
it gave us.
It gave you what?
I said I just don't like to say the name that it gave us.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and from what I've researched, the Ouija board is kind of something that a lot of people claim they have all this knowledge of, and some people are on the side of like, oh yeah, it's totally fine. There's no threats. It's just a game. And other people are like, no, do not do this. Without some say without precautions, and some say not at all. But if you talk to any demonologist or anyone who studies that kind of thing, even saying a name that comes through there could have potential consequences. So I respect that. Certainly don't want to put you in a weird situation again, but
Yeah, I didn't know that, but yeah, it's just something I have just had this natural thing of don't say it.
Yeah. It's funny that you hadn't heard that, that's as I'm thinking about it, because it seems almost intuitive that you shouldn't.
Yeah, exactly. I couldn't agree more. It's like, just don't even go there. There was a stage where it was like, don't even think that name. Don't think it. I would
Right.
distract myself. Don't, think it. And actually, until I'd written to you, I had never written it down.
Yeah. Well, hopefully we
So,
haven't stirred anything up for you.
well, that's the funny thing because, when I was listening to the last show you did with Ed, and he was talking about the family thing, how
Right.
everything seems to surround families or whatever. And
Right.
I started to think, and I actually wrote down on some paper all the things I could think of that were strange, and I filled up that piece of paper with family stories and other things that I've experienced since that time.
Interesting.
So, oh yes, there are so many stories I
It,
could tell you.
is there an example that wouldn't, maybe make a family member upset?
Oh, I could start. How far back do you want me to go?
Well,
Because I've
as far as you'd like. One of my follow-up questions was going to be, has anything like this ever happened since this initial event? But it sounds like it has.
oh yes. I don't remember hearing the story when I was really small, and the story I'll tell you. I think because a bit like I was with my kids, I never told them. I just said, stay away from that stuff. I didn't want to scare them.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted them to keep their, this stuff doesn't happen kind of
Right.
mentality. And I wonder if my parents were a bit like that too, because I don't remember being told these stories when I was the age that all this happened to me. It was just later as I grew up. Or maybe as I approached my parents and said, you know what, that really did happen when I was, a kid. Maybe you didn't see anything, but me and my sister, we did, Way back when my grandmother, this is my father's mother, my father is English.
Mm-hmm.
This happened in England, and it was during the end of World War II. My grandmother was pregnant with my father at the time. She was a wartime romance back in the day when you didn't know how long you had to live, and
Mm-hmm.
she got married quite young to an able seaman who was my dad's father. She was pregnant. My grandmother was about, I think 4 or 5 months pregnant at the time. This was London. This was obviously bombed. So it was, housing shortage. She had moved in with her in-laws.
Mm-hmm.
So she actually shared a bed with my grandfather's sister. Now, he was away on duty. He actually was on the convoys that went across the Mediterranean. He was on a tanker ship. And I've researched all this, so I even know the name of the ship he was on and everything. And there was a collision. Somebody zigged when they should have zagged, and there was a collision.
Mm-hmm.
And his tanker caught. It was loaded with millions of litres of fuel and oil and stuff, and it went up. And he died. They never found him. He was just lost at sea.
Mm-hmm.
At the very moment this was happening, my grandmother and my grandfather's sister were awoken up when it would have been exactly the time. It was in the night time, and they heard my grandfather screaming out his sister's name. And my grandmother described it as this frantic voice going, Iris, Iris, like this. That was his sister's name. And they just looked at each other and they knew. She said, I knew. He was dead. I knew. And then they got the confirmation afterwards that he actually had been lost. And like I said, they don't even know. There's no body. There's nothing. So
that's really amazing. I have to interject here because my grandmother actually has a similar story.
I'm wondering if it's like the crisis apparition kind of thing. Yeah.
I don't know. This is the strangest thing. I've never heard anybody come forward with a story like this before. And my grandmother, I think this is one of the things that kind of got me interested in paranormal things, is when I was probably maybe 7 or 8 years old. My grandmother woke up one night, and it was probably 3 a.m. and she had brothers that I believe she was older than them, but her 2 brothers were twins, and she knew one of them had died. She just got this awful feeling. This is a woman that goes to bed at like 4:30 p.m. and wakes up at probably 8 a.m. But it was really odd for her to be up at 3 a.m. She actually called my mother, and I remember our phone ringing. This is the days before cell phones, and remember our phone ringing, wondering what's going on, and she was frantic, saying, "I can't get a hold of him. I'm afraid he's gone." And sure enough, they found his car the next morning. He had a heart attack on his way home from work, and he'd been missing all afternoon. And finally, a patrol car found him early morning hours. But they said that it looked like he had been alive for several hours in the car, but just incapacitated.
Oh, wow.
But then you come along and tell this story, and it's like, wow, it's so similar.
And I often wonder if, that was, his last words or thoughts were of his pregnant wife and his family. He drowned, we think. We're pretty sure. Do you want to know the extra spooky thing to this story?
Yes.
My father was born 4 or 5 months later with a caul. So he was born with the membrane still over his face, which traditionally among sailors mean that you will never drown.
Wow.
My grandmother said she actually did have friends of my father, sailors, actually offered to buy that caul off of her, because the story goes that whoever's born with it or whoever owns it will not drown.
Wow.
And which leads into do you want me to tell you another story? Because that leads into the second story. This involves my father.
Mm-hmm.
He had emigrated out to Australia. He was only very young. I think this was about 1964.
Mm-hmm.
And he was probably about 18 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And like he explains it to me, here he was, this pommy, as we call English people, who, never been around water in his life. He didn't know how to swim. It was a hot Australian afternoon. So what did he do? Jumped in a river. And it was only when he got out of his depth that he realised he might be in some trouble. And I've asked him about this story many times, actually, because I always found it fascinating. And it never changes when he tells me. And he said that he was kind of like splashing along. He was out of his depth. He was paddling as best he could. And he said, I started to get really tired. Mm-hmm. And he said, I could feel that I was going to probably be in big trouble. And he went under a bit, and he said it was actually quite peaceful. He wasn't too worried. But then he looked up, and the best way I can describe it is he saw this figure standing there, and it was waving its arm, like, come on, come on, you can do it. And he said from out of nowhere, he just kind of got this second wind, and he managed to paddle his way across. And he said, but the funny thing is when I got there was nobody there. And I said, oh, Dad, that's a bit spooky. And I said, so what do you think it was? And he said, well, because my dad's not given, he's a very sceptical person, actually. He's not given to flights of fancy or anything like that. But he did say to me, well, the only thing I can tell you about this figure is it seemed very fatherly.
Oh, wow.
I know. So, and he didn't drown. So that happened to him too. But yes.
Wow. You're rich with stories here.
I know. I've only just started. How long you got? How long will my battery last? But
Oh,
yeah.
yeah. I mean, I'm all ears. I love these kinds of things. You know,
Okay.
I often run into people who they've either had, no experiences or maybe one that they kind of discount, or there's
Yeah.
people that have had several experiences. And
Yeah.
I just find it interesting who, why is there this kind of selection
I
about who gets
I
these?
I don't know, because you know what? I don't consider anybody in my family. I often hear people say, "I think I'm sensitive," and that I don't think so. I don't know what it is at all, but we've just got so many things. And the important thing that I have to remember about what happened when I was a child with the Ouija board
Mm-hmm.
was the sensation of the pulling out of my back.
Mm-hmm.
I
Yes.
I don't want to go without talking about that, because that is something that's really stumped me, that I've never heard or read about anybody having an experience like that.
Right.
Can I say?
Yeah. Yeah. Please continue.
Yeah, I used to feel like fingers. It would start with this. I would feel fingers like tracing some sort of pattern on my back. And it was very light. Definitely felt like fingers though. And it would keep doing this for a while. And then it was like it would pull something, almost like I had some string or something, but I could feel it pulling something out of my back. And I was not sleeping when this happened. It used to happen at all the time, at different times. I would even be sitting with my back to the back of the lounge or the chair, because I got so sick of feeling it that I would want my back against something, but it would just do it anyway. It didn't matter that there was furniture in the way. And that was, even now as an adult, I can't even find the words to describe exactly how it felt, and I don't know what it was pulling out of me. This is the thing that really kind of makes me feel squeaky and icky, is I don't know what that was. But there was a definite drawing, pulling sensation, like if you can imagine fingers just coming together and pulling something out of your back.
Now, was that
It was
when you
always,
were in bed, or was this just any random time?
it was usually any time. I can't honestly say that I remember it happening when I was in bed. It was usually when I was sitting up somewhere. Yeah.
Were you around anyone else when that happened?
Sometimes, yes. My family, yes. Sometimes I was by myself, but I always knew it was going to start, because I would feel that that tracing kind of. When I put my hand up to try and do it, it's kind of like an infinity sign or something like that. It would just be this pattern of tracing, and like fingers lightly on your back, but at the same time not exactly like that, because it didn't feel physically like fingers, but just it's just so weird to describe what it was.
Yeah.
But I haven't heard anybody saying anything like that either, so I don't know.
Yeah, that's the one I had never heard any accounts of, and maybe if we have listeners that are familiar with that kind of a thing, they could chime in some of our comments when this gets published. The only thing that I could think of was the whole Harry Potter Dementor kind of character, but it wasn't necessarily on someone's back. It was just anytime they got close to them.
Yeah, I still haven't seen that. I have never seen Harry Potter, so I'll have to still find time to look that up. I don't know if I want to, but
yeah,
yeah.
They were probably the creepiest characters on that whole series, the Dementors, I think.
Okay. Like I said, I didn't have a name for it. I didn't know what it was, and I just kept my mouth shut, because it just seemed so weird as a kid that I just knew this shouldn't be happening, and I just completely shut down, and but I don't know what it was pulling out of me, but it was definitely doing something, and I don't know what it was.
So do you feel like your parents ever maybe thought it was a bad idea to mess around with a Ouija board?
Well, I've told them that it probably was later on. At the time, I think that my parents just wanted to believe what they wanted to believe, like a lot of people do. It seems to me that, and like one of the reasons that I have rarely ever told anybody about my story is because people just tend to say, oh, you must have dreamed it, or you must be mistaken, or the way people just, and I think it's because their worldview, if nothing ever has happened much to them, or that they don't want to know about this, is that they just kind of compartmentalize it. It doesn't fit in with what they think. So the first thing they have to do is try and deny it. So I think that that's probably what my parents were doing. That we weren't in a situation where we could just readily move house or anything like that. So we were stuck where we were. And I think that it was probably, my mum was a hardworking, exhausted person. And I think it was probably just, she probably just thought it best if she didn't actually say, oh, okay, what's happening? Just like, oh no, that can't happen. And that was it. And I have to say, as a child too, it's a bit of a betrayal, because when these weird things are happening and you actually do open up because you're scared, because you don't know what's happening, and when your parents kind of like just fob you off like that and don't believe you, well, then why would you tell them?
Right.
You sort of find yourself basically on your lonesome. That's it.
Yeah. And I think there's, when someone can, look at you and say, oh, that wasn't real. I mean, they're not thinking of the lasting psychological effects that have had on you. I mean, it took you 25 years, you said, to stop sleeping with the covers over your head.
Yes. Yes.
And being confident that wasn't a dream. I think they just have to experience something like that in order to really grasp it.
Yeah, probably.
And I think, like I have kids, and, it's easy as a parent when they wake up at 2 a.m. and you're somewhat annoyed. You're like, oh God, I'm trying to sleep, Yeah. My parents used to just tell me to, just go back to bed and stay there, kind of thing. And my wife's did too. And it's kind of funny because she had this conversation with me of like, she grew up with some experiences, paranormal in nature, and that feeling of being abandoned and almost like betrayed, that stuck with her. And we try not to do that to our kids now, but you have to sit there and like wake up first and then really think, we'll make a conscious effort not to do that,
Yeah, no, I totally understand, because it's very frightening. I think it's even more frightening when you're too young to be able to have any control of the situation. It's not like you can really seek help or you can do anything about it, because your knowledge is very limited. And especially back then, like I said, this was, the mid to late 70s. There was nothing. I did later on, when I was older, at the school library, try and, if I saw anything that was connected to ghost stories or famous ghosts or, ghost stories of whatever, I would borrow the book and feverishly look through it, trying to find something to relate to, so that I could say, look, here's proof,
Right.
But yeah, even the literature at that time wasn't as expansive as it is now. So yeah, and especially not available to me as a child. So,
right.
Yeah.
Well, what else has happened personally to you since then?
Oh gosh. Well, I remember, when I was pregnant with my son, my eldest son, And this is a bit of a funny, weird kind of story. And I had gone into labour, and actually I'd been induced, so I'd had a drip put in and the artificial stuff, and it was very, very painful. And I remember thinking, oh, look, I just can't do this anymore. You know, this is so painful. This is not what I bargained for. And I was laying there, you know, writhing around in agony. And all of a sudden, it was like, okay, your wish is granted. You don't have to do this anymore. And I had this experience. And I have to say, I wasn't on, I had nitrous oxide is what I had to breathe. You know, that's what they were giving me when I was in for the contractions. And the thing with nitrous is you have to breathe it in deeply as soon as the contractions start, as soon as you know you're going to get one, otherwise it won't work. You know, that's what I was told. So, you know, I'd done that, but I was too exhausted even for that. So I was just kind of laying there. I had, I suppose, what I could only call an out-of-body experience. I said, I can't do this anymore. It's too painful. And then all of a sudden, I was kind of floating around and there was no pain. And funnily enough, I didn't have to breathe, I realised. So I was just floating around and I was thinking, this is great. This is absolutely great because that's agonising. And so I was just sort of enjoying that respite. And this, I can only describe this sort of a voice in my head or wherever I was said to me, basically, very bluntly, there's only one person that can give birth to your son, so you need to get back in there and do it. And I thought, I don't want to. That is just the worst hell I've ever been through. I don't want to. And it was very insistent, and it was insistent that I was having a son and that I needed to go and do this. And I have to say, in these days, ultrasound, this was in 1990, ultrasounds weren't that great. They would not tell you the sex of the child, so you had to wait, and it was a surprise. Anyway, so I thought, oh, gosh, here I go. I'm going to have to do this, I guess. And I decided to take a breath. So I decided to breathe. So I made this big breath, and then all of a sudden it was like whoosh, I was back in the body and the pain was back. And, you know, I went on and I gave birth. And, yes, I did have a son. So I thought that was a little surprising. Yeah, so that was a weird thing that happened to me when I was having my son.
Kind of out-of-body-ish.
Yes, I can only assume that's what it was. And the funny thing was that my husband at the time had said to me, yeah, they were a bit worried about you. And the nurse kept saying to me, tell her to breathe, because I wasn't sucking on the nitrous.
Yeah.
So I thought that's a bit strange because where I was, I didn't have to breathe. So that was great. But, yeah, so that was kind of strange. I do have another story that happened that concerns that very same son. This was many years later, and he had just turned 18, and he was having a bit of a teenage snit about something. I wouldn't buy him something on the credit card or something. I'd said no, and he was cranky about that. And so he was out in the lounge room. My other kids at the time, because he's the eldest, and I had 3 other kids, they were downstairs. Just playing videos or whatever. It wasn't that late at night, but I had decided to go to bed. And I'd since divorced. My new partner, was with me. We were asleep in bed. We were definitely asleep. My son was out in the lounge room. I didn't know what he was doing. I just knew he was a bit cranky. And we have this, it's like a string of stylized birds. They're made out of cotton. It's like I think it was made in India. And they're all different colours, and they're strung on this thick cotton thread that goes through, and there's a handmade brass bell down the bottom of it. And this thing is probably 1.5 meters long. Okay. And I had it hanging off the curtain rod. It was winter here because my son was born in June. Here in Australia, June, July and August are winter. Okay. So it was cold. So I had all the windows and the door shut because it was very cold that night. And I was asleep. My partner was asleep. And the next thing we hear the bell ring, like the bell at the bottom of the birds. I still have it right here next to me, even as I'm talking. Mm-hmm. And it didn't ring once. It rang like an old school bell, like
weird.
Ding, 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 at least half a dozen times. And I could hear it, and then I'm waking up thinking, oh my gosh, what? And my partner, we both woke up and we turned to each other and we both said, did you hear that? Did you hear that bell ring? So we'd both heard the same thing. And I was actually quite frightened, but I decided to, get courage and turn on the side lamp. And almost as if to say, yes, you did hear that bell ring. The birds were swinging in this funny pendulum fashion. And it was something I haven't been able to replicate when I've grabbed it and shook it like the bell rang. It kind of like went out and then came back to a complete stop and then went out again and came. And it did that a few times because we both saw it moving in this really strange way. And both of us had the gut feeling that something was wrong. Something was really, really wrong. And I thought, I can't sleep now. What am I going to do? So I ended up getting up and I was walking down the hall towards the lounge room and I heard my son making some really strange noises, choking kind of noises. And I found out that in his fit of adolescent peak, he had got himself drunk. No. I know. He's totally ashamed even to this day. He had drunk a lot of scotch. It was scotch or bourbon or something like that. It was strong liquor. Mm-hmm. And so he was actually laying on his back on the lounge, and I ran out and I got to him just in time to haul him up as he threw up everywhere. So if I hadn't been woken up, gone out and walked down the hall and hauled him up, he would have vomited while he was laying flat on his back and probably aspirated.
Yeah.
So anyway, he was staggeringly drunk, comatosely drunk. We ended up calling the ambulance because I could not maneuver him myself. He's a very, very big, tall person. He's over 6 foot tall. Mm-hmm. And they came and put him in the. They weren't very pleased either. They didn't treat. They showed their displeasure at this stupid boy doing something so silly. And I went to the hospital with him. And the nurse on duty, after I was there probably an hour or so, and she said, go home, Mum, we'll look after him, and in the morning he's not going to get the hangover he deserves because they hydrate them and, put the drip in. And anyway, she said, come back, we'll ring you, come back tomorrow. So I did, I went home. And I was really, at that point, I was really keyed up and I was still quite frightened. And as I was, standing there waiting to get taken home by my partner, because I'd gone in the ambulance, I just sort of felt more thankful than frightened. And it was really funny because when I picked my son up and he was very contrite and I, kind of put him in the car and proceeded on the lecture that he should have got, he said to me, because I said, you must be some lucky kid because somebody's watching out over you because this is what happened and this is why I found you and how I've stopped something terrible happening. Mm-hmm. And he took one look at me and he said, well, maybe it isn't that they care about me. Maybe they care about you.
Mm-hmm.
When they didn't want that to happen to you.
Right.
And that kind of made me think in a different way, which kind of led me to actually thinking, I don't know what that was. I don't know if it was some disembodied spirit. I don't know if it was a relative. I don't know if it was a future me or a future Alec, my son. I don't know who that was, what or why that happened, or why that would happen to me and not happen to somebody else.
Yeah.
So it did open up a lot of questions, but it's one of the most strongest things I've had because I had a witness this time.
Mm-hmm.
I had somebody who heard and saw exactly the same thing that I did. So that's probably one of the most physically, like mentally, emotionally, intellectually life-changing things, because even though I'd had, a few encounters and things happen, that one was a real biggie. Mm-hmm. That one was like, there is no doubt of any evidence because you saw it, you heard it, you had a witness. Right. And yeah, there was like, and some people may say, oh, well, they may not be connected, that may not have happened for that reason or whatever. And I have had that said to me. Mm-hmm. I feel that the only logical thing is that they were somehow connected.
Yeah.
But, people are going to, like I say, they always say, I don't know, they don't want to believe you when you tell them things. But,
and it's really validating when other people witness the same thing.
Yes, it is, because usually it's just you,
Right.
But yeah, and I was about to say, but that house was a bit funny. Yeah. But it's like every house I live in is funny. So I don't know if it was exactly that or if it was just stronger there. And it is really funny because my partner is actually American.
Oh.
And yes, from Texas. We've been together over 10 years now, and they actually came from America and immigrated out here to live with us. So when my partner came out here, they moved into the house, and after a few weeks, my partner came up to me and said, okay, so what is it with the stairs? And I said, the stairs? And they said, yes, what is it with the stairs? And I said, do you mean that you feel like you get to a certain spot and something is chasing you up the stairs? And they said, yes. And then it was like the dam had broken then, because all the kids would then like, yeah, there's really something about those stairs. So it actually made us all talk to each other about, and all of us had experienced this same sensation on this staircase, on this particular part of this staircase, that you just wanted to run up those stairs and not hang around. So I don't know what that was about, but yeah.
Yeah, it's funny when you start talking to people. I think I avoided talking to people about some of my experiences for a really long time, and then finally, with the age of the internet, you can kind of secretly have discussions with people without risking personal relationships, And then over time, you just end up coming out with it anyway. And then you find out a lot of the people that have had experiences themselves, or
yes.
At least one or two that they're not.
Yes.
They're not ashamed to admit,
Yeah. Or when they find out that you actually may be open to listening to what they say and not telling them that they must have dreamt it or blah, blah. Right. Yeah, people do tend to talk to you a bit more, I've found. But, but there's just been so many strange, coincidences. I don't know if you call them that. It's just lots of weird things. I'll tell you, do you want to know one? I can tell you another one.
Sure.
this just came. This I actually had a witness for this one too, because this is just comes filed under one of those weird things that happens to you.
Mm-hmm.
I am a university student, and this happened 2 years ago, because I was in my second year. And I actually used to catch the local bus service into the local university with my daughter on Tuesdays, because we both had classes,
Mm-hmm.
and parking there is impossible. So it's better to just get public transport in. So we were doing this, and the bus was chugging along, and my daughter was sitting in front of me. I was sitting in the seat behind her. And there was still some spare seats, but the bus stopped, and this lady got on at one of the stops on the way, and she sat next to me. And I thought, oh, okay, I'm the lucky one. There's still all these spare seats, but she's sitting next to me. And then she turned to me and she said, oh, I've had a really bad day today. And I said, oh, have you? And she said, yeah, I had some bad news this morning. My neighbour went on a holiday to Hawaii, and he didn't know he was sick, and he died while he was over there. And I said, oh, yeah, that's terrible. You know, poor family, poor thing, you know. And she said, yeah, he lived right next door to me, and it's just really sad. And my daughter, I could tell, was sitting in front of me thinking, oh, wow, you know, some funny person sat next to Mum. I'm glad they didn't sit next to me, kind of thing. And then the funny thing is she was on the bus long enough to tell me this story, and then she got off at the stop after she finished speaking to me. And I didn't think any more of it. I thought, oh, well, that was a little strange, but, you know, you meet some strange people or whatever. And then I used to visit a very dear friend of mine on Fridays, and we'd just usually have a cuppa, you know, and a bit of a chat. And so I got to her place, and I came inside, and we had a cup of tea, and she was sitting there, and she said, oh, I've had some really bad news this week. And I said, oh, have you? And she said, yeah, my friend's husband, they went to Hawaii, and he didn't know he was sick. And, yeah, it's just, I've just found out about it, and I'm really worried. And I said, stop right there, he's dead.
Oh, gosh.
And she said, what do you mean? And I said, I've heard this story just the other day. And it was almost exactly the same words, and it actually was the same person.
Oh, my gosh.
And she said to me, well, you know, I'm really glad you told me, actually, because she didn't want to bombard her with what happened. Yeah. So, yeah, he actually had died. It was that woman's husband. And I don't know if by some funny coincidence, I was told that very story about the very same person on the Tuesday on the bus.
Wow. I don't know if I would have had the heart to say anything, just in case there was a small chance that it wasn't that person, you know?
Yeah, no, I knew it was them.
Wow.
I don't know how I knew, but I just knew. I don't know. But it was the same person.
That's quite the coincidence, and it's funny that your daughter was there to witness that too.
Yes, she was there, because when I came home from my friends and I said to my daughter, guess what? You're never going to believe this. But they kind of do, because this happens to me a lot. I don't know whether I have this theory, if the world is a computer simulation, like some people, scientists and some people say that it is, we're all living in this simulated world, that the person that's controlling my program is really lazy.
Nice.
So there's all these coincidences, because they're just too lazy to, you know, go out and think of something new happening. Wow. So, yeah.
Well, I've really enjoyed our conversation.
Oh, there is more.
There's more.
There is more.
I think I need to get you back on the show.
Okay.
If you've got more, then we definitely need to have you back.
Yeah. Well, I could probably tell you just one if you've got time really quickly. Do you have time?
Sure.
Okay. Well, okay. I always felt that whatever the thing was that frightened us and scared us as kids had kind of hung around. I don't know how I can say that, and I don't know why, but it just always felt like it was some background thing, you know. When I was older, I used to have these really funny, I wouldn't say sleep paralysis because you can't move, right? Can you when you have sleep paralysis?
No. Right.
Well, I can move. I used to have these dreams of these. I would wake up. I wouldn't be paralyzed, but I would wake up and there would be like this black mass so close to my face, like stealing my breath, almost smothering me. And as soon as I would open my eyes and I would see that it was there, and I would always wake up screaming and pushing it away and frightening the life out of whoever happened to be in the house actually with me, because my kids had heard me scream from way down the other end of the house. It was very frightening. And then I went to have a blood test one time. This is going to sound really strange too. I went to have a blood test done. Not the kind of place that you'd think that this would happen, but I was, sitting there in the chair with my arm out, and the woman who was taking the blood kept looking at me. And she finished up what she was doing, and she, we signed the papers and did everything, and she turned to me and she said, "You've got something nasty with you." And I said, "Oh, really?" And she said, "You know what I mean." And I thought, okay, do I? Okay. But I didn't, and she said, just let me try and help you with that. And she did all this kind of weird hand movements, like I suppose aura type of thing. And she said, "Yeah, that's a bit better now, but that's nasty." And I kind of like went, okay, thank you very much. Yeah, and I walked out because I just thought that was very strange. But it was funny that it wasn't until later that I wondered if this black thing that I saw if that was what she was talking about. And it was funny because when I started to then, I was older, and I started to think about, what can I do about this? And I read about protecting yourself. Actually making a space around you that nothing can get into. So I decided to start doing that. And this thing, funnily enough, got further and further away. Like if I put a bubble around myself or something, it would be outside of that. And then I tried to do like the whole bed, and it would be away from that, but it was still there, and I would still see it, and it would still make me scream because I was very frightened. And it was really funny because at the same time we started to have trouble with, we have an ensuite bathroom, and I have a nightlight in there so that, it's not too dark of a nighttime. And when this started to get very intense and very scary, I would always make sure that nightlight was on. It was like just a bit of a comfort,
Right.
And it's a plug-in one with an LED, couple of little LED lights inside, and it has a slider switch on the side. So it went, the off was at the top, and then it had like on and then auto. You could have 3 different modes. And when it was on auto, which is what I kept it on, it had a night sensor in it. So as soon as it got dark, the light would turn on automatically by itself. Well, I started to wake up and the night light was off, which I thought was a bit strange. But I thought, it must have broken, or the bulb's gone, or whatever, or I've accidentally turned off the power point, and all these things. And this happened quite a few times, that the light was off when I would wake up. Coincidentally, a lot of the time that was when the big black thing was around. But I thought, I'm going to have to look at this nightlight. And it was when I actually looked at it that I realised it had been slid to the off position. And as you do, I just said, well, that must have happened. I've accidentally switched it off, or, my partner's accidentally switched it off. Needed to use the PowerPoint. We do have 2 PowerPoints in there, I have to say. So, but you do all this stuff, and I still try and logic my way out of everything.
Mm-hmm.
And so I thought, well, I know what I'll do. I'll put tape over the switch so that it can't slide up and down, and it'll just stay on auto. So I did that, and it got switched off under the tape.
Oh, wow.
And not only that, a lamp was turned on that's right outside our bedroom in the lounge room. We have a lamp on a table. It was switched on, and nobody had switched it on. My kids are old now. They're in their 20s. They didn't switch it on. My partner didn't switch it on. I didn't switch it on, but the light had been turned off and the lamp had been switched on. And my partner said to me, okay, this is getting too freaky and creepy for me now. Okay. So I thought, oh, what am I going to do? So I just thought, I'll do the thing that everybody does. I just got some sage and I walked around and said, you cannot stay here. You've got to go back to wherever you came from, whatever. And that was the end of problem with my nightlight. I still have the same nightlight, and it's never happened again.
Wow. See, yeah. I'd be setting up video cameras.
Well, I didn't do that, but I don't have anything like that. And to be honest, the first few times it happened, I did think, it must just be getting accidentally switched off. But then I thought, I'm going to make sure that thing is on when I go to bed. I'm going to make sure that it is actually impossible for it to be switched off after I saw that it had been switched off, but it still happened. And when I saw that it had happened under the tape, that kind of scared me a little too, I have to admit, because I have to say too, in order to switch it off, it has to defy gravity because the slider has to go up,
Wow.
not down. So it didn't just fall down or something like that.
Wow. That's quite a lot. I would say you're a kind of a magnet to these types of circumstances.
Yeah. I don't know though. I often wonder, is it us, or doesn't this happen to other people? Because surely it does. I don't know. Like I said, I don't know if it's still that same thing that was around when I was a kid, or oh gosh.
I don't know.
I mean,
I know that my wife and I both have had several experiences throughout our lives, and some of them have been shared. And then there's people I know who, like I said, don't have any experiences. I don't know if something follows you. Every once in a while I think that, because I've moved a lot, and I think, well, maybe something is following me. And then I go 3 or 4 years without anything happening. And it seems like when it happens after that, it really picks up again. It's like something every week or so. So I don't know.
I don't know either. I mean, yeah, like I said, there's still things that I've written down that have happened then, and have happened to not just me,
Right. Do you want people to be able to connect with you offline, or do you want me to maybe post an announcement on Facebook for anybody else that has similar stories or has heard of anything like that to kind of connect with you on my page?
Yeah, that would be okay.
Okay. Well, thanks again so much. I know the time difference is really awkward here.
Yes.
You're a day ahead of me.
Yes, I always say I'm from the future.
Yeah.
I always tell people, it's the new year here. There is a 2017.
Right.
We're already in it, Yeah.
Well, thank you so much again for reaching out to me. And I would like to get, maybe back and maybe on my next season, just revisit with you and see what's new and maybe get to some of these other stories, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, that's fine.
I want to send a huge thank you to Samantha for coming on the show and being willing to share all of this with me. I actually ended up needing to cut our conversation short when she had additional stories to share due to how late it was getting here in the United States. I'll definitely need to have her back on the show for some additional conversation. If you want to read Samantha's original email and full account of her Ouija board experience, please visit deviatus.com to read it along with the rest of the show notes. It takes a lot of courage to come forward with these accounts, and I hope that by talking about these kinds of experiences, it can be somewhat therapeutic, and if anything, let others know that these things do happen, and you're not alone. If you'd like to share an experience with me, please get in touch with me through the website or send me an email at deviatuspod@gmail.com. Next time on Deviatus, we're going to be hearing from another listener about a personal experience with a UFO and alien grays. Make sure to follow me on Twitter and Instagram at deviatuspod to stay current on all my latest episodes, or you can subscribe in iTunes or your favorite podcatcher. And don't forget, my newsletter is coming out June 5th, so head over to deviatus.com and sign up. Until next time, have a great week.